The morning started like any other in Cedar Grove, the kind of suburban American town where the sidewalks looked clean, the lawns looked trimmed, and everyone liked to pretend nothing ugly ever happened there. But beneath the tidy houses and clipped hedges, there were unspoken rules. Rules about who belonged, who didn't, and who people felt entitled to judge on sight. And on this particular Thursday morning, Officer Mark Hollis was in a mood. He was pacing beside his patrol car, sunglasses low on his nose, jaw tight with irritation. The dispatcher had just informed him that city officials were cracking down on street obstructions, a vague policy that rarely bothered anyone except food trucks, landscapers, or, more accurately, whoever looked like they wouldn't fight back. Across the street sat a white delivery van with the logo, Urban Link Logistics, printed cleanly across its side. Nothing unusual, except for the man climbing out of the driver's seat. A tall black man in a dark gray hoodie and work pants, carrying a tablet and scanning a cluster of packages stacked neatly in the back. To Officer Hollis, that was enough. He watched the man with a look that wasn't curiosity. No, it was dismissal, the kind of subtle contempt that didn't need words to be understood. And that is when the story begins. The moment Officer Hollis stepped off the curb and shouted, "Hey, you can't just park wherever you want, buddy." The man, whose name was Darius Coleman, looked up with a calmness that wasn't forced, but earned, the kind that came from years of swallowing pride and choosing peace. He glanced at the officer, then at the clear curb where no signs indicated restrictions. "Morning, officer," Darius said. "I'm making a scheduled delivery. Won't be long." But Hollis had already decided that wouldn't be good enough. "Scheduled delivery?" The officer scoffed, approaching the van. "You drivers are all the same, lazy, blocking traffic, acting like the rules don't apply to you." Darius froze, not because he was intimidated, but because the word lazy cut deeper than the officer realized. It was a word sharpened by centuries of prejudice. A word black men heard too often from people who had never carried the weight they had to carry. Darius inhaled slowly. He wasn't angry. Not yet. But he felt something heavier, disappointment. "Officer," he said firmly, "I'm working. Just like you are." Hollis narrowed his eyes. "Don't get smart with me. License and registration for the vehicle. Now." Darius blinked. "This is a company vehicle. My credentials are on the dash. I'm just dropping off." "I said now." Hollis barked, hand inching toward his citation pad like he was itching for a reason to use it. Neighbors up the street paused watering their lawns. A jogger slowed down, removing an earbud. People weren't staring because they cared, they were staring because they recognized this scene. Because it was familiar in a way that made them uncomfortable. Hollis walked around the van, making a dramatic show of inspecting it. "No parking permit, might be an expired plate, and I'm seeing potential safety violations. This is going to be a hefty citation." Darius swallowed. "Officer, with all due respect, everything is updated. I can show you the paperwork." "Don't worry," Hollis said, smirking. "I'm sure your boss can explain it to you. Or fire you. Whichever comes first." The words hit like a slap. But Darius didn't react. He'd learned long ago that some people were loud because silence scared them. He reached into the glove compartment and pulled out the necessary files. "Here," he said simply, handing them over. But Hollis didn't even glance at the papers. Instead, he focused on the man himself. That hoodie. Those work boots. That skin. To him, it all told a story he believed before he ever asked for facts. "Look," Hollis sneered, "I don't have time for games. You're parked illegally, period. So the citation stands." Darius exhaled sharply, feeling irritation tug at the edges of his patience. "This is a legal delivery zone," he reminded him. "The city updated the maps last month. Your station should have. Are you telling me how to do my job?" Hollis snapped. "No, sir," Darius said, keeping his voice steady. "I'm telling you that the information you're using. I don't want excuses." The officer's voice boomed too loud for the quiet neighborhood. A few pedestrians flinched. The jogger shook her head and jogged faster, trying to pretend she hadn't seen the power imbalance playing out. To Hollis, this wasn't about a parking space. It was about reminding someone who held the authority. He leaned closer. You delivery guys think you're invincible. Driving trash vans, blocking roads, draining city resources. If you want respect, try earning it. The jab landed cruelly. Not just because of the insult, but because of the assumption. Darius opened his mouth, then closed it again. He thought of all the young employees he mentored, the neighborhoods he donated programs to, the scholarships he funded, the single parents his company helped employ, the police departments he had met with to discuss community reform. But none of that mattered here, because Hollis had already labeled him, and label was law in the officer's mind. Before Darius could respond, Hollis pulled out his citation pad with an entitled flourish. All right, he announced loudly, I'm writing you up. Maybe next time you'll think before parking your work junk in a residential neighborhood. Darius stared at him, a slow, incredulous realization forming in his mind. This man had no idea who he was speaking to or threatening, that he never knew the lazy delivery driver standing in front of him owned the very company he was insulting. Urban Link Logistics wasn't just a business. It was a national powerhouse in the logistics industry, responsible for thousands of jobs and partnerships with government agencies, including the police department Hollis worked for. And more importantly, the man this officer was trying to demean had personally donated millions toward community policing reform, efforts designed to prevent exactly what was happening right now. But Darius didn't brag that he didn't need to. Instead, he simply said, Officer, I think you may want to look at my paperwork. Hollis scoffed. But you think there's something in there that's going to change my mind? Yes, Darius said quietly. I believe there is. He handed the folder forward. Hollis grabbed it with exaggerated annoyance. But the second he flipped it open, his jaw tightened, then slackened, then froze completely. Inside wasn't some worker's log. It was a series of certifications, credentials, and an ID badge that read, Urban Link Logistics, Executive Operations. Darius J. Coleman, Chief Executive Officer. Hollis's lips parted. A flicker of confusion. Then disbelief. Then something like fear. You're the CEO? He muttered. Darius didn't smile. He simply met the officer's stare and said, Yes, I am. The silence that followed was suffocating. And it should have ended there. It should have been a turning point. But Officer Hollis, like many who abuse their authority, wasn't ready to lose control. He abruptly snapped the folder shut and stepped forward. This still doesn't change the fact, he growled, that you disrespected an officer of the law. And I can escalate this if I need to. Darius's eyes widened, not with fear, but disbelief. You want to escalate? He asked softly. I will if I have to, Hollis barked. Don't test me. And that was when something shifted, not in Darius, but in the air around them. A neighbor across the street lifted their phone. A line of cars slowed. People were watching. But more importantly, someone else was watching too. A black SUV that had been approaching quietly slowed to a stop. The tinted window rolled down. And a voice called out, Darius? Is everything okay here? The voice wasn't random. It wasn't a coworker. It wasn't a friend. It was someone Officer Hollis knew. Someone he never expected to see here. Someone who would change everything. Someone whose presence would flip this entire situation upside down and expose a truth Hollis never imagined. The tinted SUV eased to a stop like a saucer settling into calm water, and for a moment the morning's small, brittle world held its breath. Darius watched through narrowed eyes as the window rolled down, revealing a face that had repeatedly shown up in meetings, in press releases, and in the footage of community forums he'd spoken at over the past 5 years. It was Chief Mariah Alvarez, Chief of Police, Cedar Grove. Brown hair pulled back in a tight bun, uniform pristine. Not a ceremonial appearance. This was her, the woman who'd signed memorandums with Darius's foundation, who'd stood beside him at rallies thanking the community for their willingness to try new ways of policing. Darius? Is everything okay here? She called, voice even but threaded with something that could be read as both concern and exasperation. Hollis's face went through a series of small, ugly contortions. Surprise, then anger, then the grudging calculation of a man who suddenly realized his mistakes might not stay private. "Chief," Hollis said, his voice struggling for decorum. "Everything's under control. This man is parked illegally, causing a disturbance." Chief Alvarez didn't look at Hollis. She looked at Darius, and there was a softness there, the kind that occurs when people recognize each other as partners instead of strangers. "Darius, are you all right?" Darius offered the briefest of nods. "Yes, Chief. I'm fine. This is an unnecessary citation, but the officer is doing his job," Hollis interjected, full of brittle righteousness. "I was just enforcing the ordinance." Chief Alvarez turned her gaze back to Hollis, and for the first time in the exchange the balance of power shifted palpably. Her jaw tightened. She had a duty to her officers, sure, but she also had a duty to the community, and she knew the optics of an argument between a white officer and a black man who happened to be a CO would be used by people on both sides as evidence for their own narratives. "Mark," she said quietly, using his first name in a way that suggested both authority and disappointment, "what's going on?" Hollis straightened, as if trying to put distance between the officer he wanted to be and the man he had just acted like. "Chief, this driver was parked at a residential curb and he has paperwork," she said simply, glancing at the folder Darius still held. "Let me see it." Darius passed the file over. The chief skimmed, the way somebody does when they have to be quick but precise. An eye for credibility, a mind trained to spot discrepancy. The badge, Urban Link Logistics, Executive Operations, was clear. The donation paperwork was there, too, grant agreements, signatures, memos related to the training programs and community initiatives Darius had funded. Chief Alvarez's expression softened again, but there was steel in it. "Darius, thank you for everything you and your foundation have supported. We've made substantial progress together." He shrugged as if shrugging off praise. "We've only started." The neighborhood watched, the way neighborhoods do, parties to something they feel they don't deserve to be invited to but can't help watching anyway. Old men who'd sipped coffee on stoops for 30 years, young mothers with babies in strollers, teenagers on their way to school, all of them turned their faces toward the scene, each carrying their own private inventory of prejudice and hope. Hollis felt exposed. The kind of exposure that comes when someone's private assumptions are ripped open by inconvenient facts. He forced a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Well then, perhaps we can resolve this quietly." There was a beat of silence. Darius could have leaned into relief, could have smiled at Chief Alvarez, could have let the situation dissolve into embarrassed politeness. That would have been the easiest thing. But Darius had been trying for years to make sure these moments stopped being quietly resolved. He had poured money and time into training, into civilian oversight boards, into policies that would prevent precisely the kind of micro-abuse he'd just faced. He looked at the chief and then at Hollis, and his calm hardened into resolve. "Chief, I appreciate your time, but I'm not here to get you in trouble. I'm here so this doesn't keep happening to other people." Alvarez's eyes flicked toward Hollis, then back to Darius. A complex calculus unrolled behind her face. Duty to officers, duty to the public, and the simple human urge to avoid conflict. She made a decision. "Mark, let's speak privately for a moment. Darius, can you step inside the van while we sort this out? I don't want a crowd forming." Darius hesitated, then nodded. He climbed back into the driver's seat, closing the door softly. The van's small, utilitarian space felt intimate and oddly safe. Inside, he could hear muffled voices, neighbors speculating, a child asking its mother why men were yelling, and the thin hum of the city. Outside, Chief Alvarez and Hollis walked a few paces away. Darius could see their profiles through the window. He watched their mouths move in low, urgent conversation. The chief's gestures were deliberate, her tone measured. Hollis was defensive, his voice climbing on occasion. Darius could see the veins at Hollis's neck pulse with irritation. He recognized the same impatience he had encountered in boardrooms and city meetings, the way people who had power but lacked perspective doubled down instead of listening. When the chief returned, she was not alone. A uniformed officer stood slightly behind her, a younger man Darius had seen at the community meetings, Officer Jamal Reed, one of the recruits who'd benefited directly from Urban Link's scholarship program. Jamal's presence was a quiet, powerful testament to what reform could produce. A black officer who'd been mentored, trained, and supported by programs Darius had helped create. Jamal's eyes flicked to Darius with something like recognition and gratitude. For a second, the world felt full of the small connections that make change possible. But change is messy. Progress is a hard, flinty path, and those who had always felt entitled to power rarely gave it up without a fight. Chief Alvarez spoke then, publicly but with a calm that brokered no argument. "We're going to handle this administratively. Mark, you will document the interaction fully. Darius, will make note of your delivery schedules and ensure dispatch is updated so this doesn't recur." Hollis bristled. "I don't need a lecture about documentation." "You need to do the job you swore to do," Chief Alvarez replied. "Document, yes. But also understand the impact of your language." Hollis's jaw clenched, and for one impossible moment the thin veneer of professionalism cracked. "Impact," he repeated like a challenge. "Are you trying to tell me I—" "Mark," the chief interrupted, softer now, "we can all do better. Let's start there." People around them exhaled. The moment might have diffused. Darius felt a tentative warmth spread through his chest, the small flowering of hope that comes when a system appears to correct itself. He unclipped his seatbelt, planning to step out and thank the chief for intervening. That was when Hollis's expression changed in a way that made the hair at the back of Darius's neck stand up. It was no longer the face of a man embarrassed or conciliatory. It was the face of someone who had decided he would not be told how to behave, no matter who stood across from him. "You know what?" Hollis said, loud enough that neighbors stopped mid-conversation. "I don't like being lectured on the sidewalk. I don't like being told I'm biased." Chief Alvarez's calm faltered. She had not expected Hollis to make this public turn. "Mark." Hollis pointed an accusing finger at Darius in a motion that was almost theatrical. "And you, boss man or whatever you call yourself, don't get to come down here and act like you're above the law because you sign a few checks." The words landed like hammer blows. Jamal's face tightened. Darius felt the old familiar burn of humiliation, not merely because of the insult, but because of the implication. That money was a counterfeit power, that charity bought absolution. He thought of the kids he'd given scholarships to, the programs that had literally saved lives, and felt an anger rise. An anger tempered by years of trying to be larger than the insult. "Money didn't make me a person worth less of respect, Mark," Darius said, voice steady but low. "It's not a shield. It's a responsibility." Hollis sneered. "Responsibility? Responsibility would be you making sure your drivers obey the law." "Officer," Chief Alvarez said, trying to steer the conversation away from the combustible language, "this isn't the time for a podium moment. Mark, report your findings and we'll take it from there. Everyone, let's try to keep this calm." But Hollis was done with calm. He took a step forward, closer to the van, and his hand moved toward his radio. The street seemed to narrow, like a lens focusing down to one single point. "Dispatch, I need an additional unit to my location," Hollis barked, the radio crackling. "Possible obstruction, possible?" Darius's mind raced. Backup meant escalation. Backup meant more uniforms, more eyes, more versions of the story that could be spun into something ugly. He could see a future in which the narrative was twisted. Tow resists lawful officer, officer threatened, restraint justified. Chief Alvarez's face hardened. She put a hand briefly on Hollis's shoulder, not to restrain him but to communicate a quiet command. "Mark, do not escalate this. We're handling it." Hollis looked at her like she just tried to take his badge. For a second, the tension between them was tangible, electric. Then Hollis did something that shocked everyone. He stepped back, hands raised in a show of compliance, but his face was a map of smoldering resentment. Darius exhaled slowly, thinking the immediate danger had passed. He opened the van door with a cautious hand and leaned out, prepared to speak with the chief and Officer Jamal about the procedural steps they would take. And that was when the youngest child on the block, no more than 7, pointed up the street, her voice high and brittle with curiosity and fear. "Mama, look." The man with the police car is calling more friends. Every head turned. The neighborhood's eyes went to the street Hollis had radioed toward. A shape was at the far end, a vehicle, its identity not yet clear. But the sight of it made every heart in that instant prepare for escalation. Chief Alvarez noticed it too. She took one more step forward, ready to intervene. Hollis's hand twitched toward his sidearm in a reflex that made the blood in Darius's ears roar. Time slowed. In that slow, elastic second, Darius thought of every policy he had funded, every young person who had entered a police training program because someone chose to believe in a different way forward. He thought of Officer Jamal, of the chief, of communities that deserved safety without humiliation. And he thought of the man patting the citation pad in his back pocket, a man whose next move could undo all the progress they had achieved or, worse, harden it into a headline that would be weaponized against change. The distant vehicle grew closer, its engine a steady thrum that could either be reassurance or doom. Hollis's eyes were fixed on it. Chief Alvarez's hand tightened on her radio. Jamal's stance shifted, ready. Darius's heart hammered against his ribs. And then, Hollis made the decision that would set everything in motion. "Everyone, hands where I can see 'em," he barked suddenly, pointing not at Darius but toward Officer Jamal and Chief Alvarez alike, as if asserting authority over them all. For a sliver of a second, the street fell into an impossible silence, then exploded into 1,000 small sounds, an intake of breath, a baby's cry, a car door slamming shut somewhere down the block. Darius felt like a lighthouse seeing someone throw a match at the sea. The officer's command, misdirected and aggressive, hung in the air like a fuse. And as the approaching vehicle rounded the corner fully into view, Darius recognized the license plate. It was the municipal car assigned to the mayor's office. What rolled down the street in that moment would decide whether the morning's humiliation would be swept under a rug or whether it would become the spark that finally forced real change. The mayor's municipal car rolled slowly into the neighborhood, its engine humming with a kind of low authority that wasn't loud, but undeniable. The sunlight glinted off the chrome bumper as it approached, and the atmosphere on the street thickened, as though the air itself was aware that whatever happened next, right here on this quiet patch of cedar-lined suburbia, was going to matter. Darius stood outside the van now, hands visible, body calm yet tense, poised like a man who knew the wrong reaction could rewrite the narrative instantly. Hollis's command still echoed in the air, "Everyone, hands where I can see 'em." A command so wildly out of protocol that it left even Chief Alvarez momentarily stunned. The mayor's car came to a full stop near the curb. The back door swung open, and out stepped Mayor Anthony Langford, a tall, sharply dressed black man in his early 40s, known for his polished tone and firm stances on community reform. He had been elected on promises of bridging the divide between marginalized communities and law enforcement, and he had stood alongside Darius many times during community outreach events. It took Mayor Langford all of 10 seconds to assess the situation. His eyes swept across the frozen tableau. Officer Hollis, chest puffed and sweating. Chief Alvarez with her jaw set but composed. Officer Jamal standing firmly, subtly positioning himself between Darius and Hollis. And Darius, steady, centered, patience wrapped around a frustration that had almost cracked. "What?" Mayor Langford said, voice low and dangerous, "is going on here?" Hollis cleared his throat, then said with a brittle edge, "Mayor Langford, sir, there's an ongoing incident. I asked for backup. The driver," he jabbed a thumb toward Darius, "was obstructing the roadway and refusing instructions." Chief Alvarez's head snapped toward Hollis. "That's not what happened, Mark." "It's exactly what happened." Hollis doubled down, voice rising. "I was enforcing the law. He," Hollis pointed again, "got confrontational. And then you," he pointed at the chief, "undermined my authority in front of him." The mayor's eyes narrowed. He looked at Darius, at the neighbors gathering quietly along the sidewalks, at the children being ushered behind their mother's legs, at the jogger who'd stopped again now that something bigger was unfolding. "Darius," the mayor said calmly, "tell me." Darius inhaled. He didn't want to throw gasoline where water could suffice. Yet he also understood that silence was a privilege he did not have, not now. "Mayor," he said evenly, I was making a delivery. Legally parked. Officer Hollis approached aggressively, used language that was unnecessary, and ignored valid paperwork. When Chief Alvarez intervened, he escalated the situation further. Hollis scoffed loudly. The mayor didn't acknowledge it. And, Darius added, he radioed for more units after the situation was already defused. Murmurs rippled through the neighborhood. Mayor Langford's expression shifted ever so slightly: anger, disbelief, calculation. He turned to Hollis. Is this accurate? Hollis's mouth twisted. He's exaggerating to cover up his behavior. My behavior? Darius asked, finally letting some of the hurt slip through. Officer, I said 5 sentences in total. You called me lazy before you even asked why I was parked. That's not enforcement, that's profiling. The crowd murmured louder now. Someone muttered, I heard him say it. Another whispered, not again. Not here. A teenager raised his phone, recording. The mayor exhaled slowly. Mark, please tell me you didn't. But Hollis exploded. He didn't just cut the mayor off. He detonated years of internal resentment in one catastrophic burst. You think just because he's some hotshot so he's innocent? Hollis shouted, face red. You're all treating him like he's above the law. You're all bending over backwards because he has money. Because he donates to your campaigns and your pet projects. The street fell dead silent. Chief Alvarez froze, as though she had just watched her longest-serving officer willingly sink himself. Officer Jamal closed his eyes, jaw tightening. And the mayor, once composed, once measured, let out a slow sigh heavy with disappointment. Hollis, he said quietly, you need to stop talking. But Hollis wasn't stopping. Years of insecurity, bitterness, and unaddressed bias poured out of him in one unstoppable wave. No, he snapped. I'm done pretending. I'm done being lectured. I'm done with all these reforms shoved down our throats. I'm sick of these people thinking they can do no wrong. These people, the mayor repeated, voice ice cold. Darius felt something inside him crack. He knew what Hollis meant. Everyone did. And pretending not to hear it would only allow the poison to spread further. Hollis, Chief Alvarez said sharply, that is enough. But the officer wasn't listening. His dignity was unraveling, and instead of grabbing the thread and tying it off, he pulled. You want to know the truth? Hollis yelled, looking straight at Darius as if daring him to flinch. If you hadn't been standing out here like you own the world, acting like you're better than everyone, none of this. The mayor cut him off, his voice resonant and unshakable. Mark Hollis, he said, you're relieved of duty. Effective immediately. Gasps rippled. The neighborhood erupted in whispers. Hollis blinked like he'd been slapped. You can't, I just did. You can't take my badge. I didn't take it, Mark. The mayor's voice softened into something heartbreaking. You threw it away yourself. For the first time, Hollis looked genuinely shaken, not defiant, not angry, just lost. His eyes darted around, searching for anyone who might support him. He found none. Chief Alvarez stepped forward. Mark, hand over your badge and sidearm. A long, tense moment passed. And then, Hollis shattered. I am not the bad guy, he shouted suddenly, voice cracking. I'm not racist. I'm not one of those officers. I'm doing my job. Nobody said you were a monster, Chief Alvarez said gently but firmly. But your actions were wrong. Hollis looked at his badge, then at his sidearm. And something dark flickered across his face. For a split second, everyone on the street felt it, an instinctual prickle at the base of the spine. A threat forming. A possibility of sharpening. Officer Jamal took one tiny, almost imperceptible step forward, blocking the line between Hollis and the mayor. A protective move. A courageous one. One that didn't go unnoticed. Hollis's eyes darted to him. You, he whispered bitterly. Of course you'd take his side. Jamal didn't respond, but the refusal to engage only inflamed the tension. The mayor's voice turned urgent. Mark, hand over the weapon. Hollis didn't move. Neighbors edged backward. The jogger silently mouthed, "Oh God," and Darius felt his entire body go alert, fight or flight instincts awakening like a storm. The air grew tight, suffocating. A fragile, terrifying second stretched like a drawn bowstring. Then, slowly, fingers trembling, Hollis unhooked his holster. The chief reached out her hand. The crowd collectively held its breath. And then, Hollis did something no one expected. He didn't hand over the weapon. He dropped it, right in the middle of the street, letting it fall loudly, dramatically, deliberately. The gun clattered on the asphalt, metal echoing like a warning shot that hadn't been fired. "I hope you're all happy," Hollis spat, voice shaking. "You're destroying good cops. You're destroying this department. And when this city falls apart, don't blame me." He took a single step backward, then another. His breathing was erratic now, panic beginning to set in as the consequences of his actions caught up like a tidal wave. "You ruined me," Hollis growled, pointing at Darius again. "This is on you." Darius didn't respond. He didn't need to. The truth was naked in the street. Chief Alvarez instructed Jamal to secure the weapon. The mayor kept his eyes on Hollis, ready for anything. And then Hollis turned. Not toward his patrol car. Not toward the chief. But toward the mayor's car, his eyes fixed on the open back door. It was a movement so abrupt, so unpredictable, that it sliced the tension wide open. "Mark!" the chief shouted. Officer Jamal reached for his cuffs. The mayor stepped back. And Darius saw something the others didn't. He saw Hollis's face not as an officer but as a man drowning, thrashing, reckless, dangerous in his desperation. But the worst part, he wasn't running away. He was running toward something. Something inside the mayor's car. Something concealed. Something he shouldn't have known was there. And before anyone could react, Hollis lunged. Right into the back seat. The chief shouted. The mayor shouted. Officer Jamal rushed forward. And Darius moved without thinking, instincts firing from a place deeper than fear. What Hollis grabbed, what he pulled out of that car, what he planned to do with it, would change every life on that street. And as Hollis spun around, holding something none of them expected, the entire neighborhood screamed. The conference room fell into a stunned silence after Marcus finished speaking. His words still lingered in the air like the fading vibration of a struck bell, deep, trembling, impossible to ignore. Officer Bradley stood frozen in the very seat where he had spoken so confidently just moments ago. His bravado deflated and replaced with a slow, creeping realization that everything he thought he knew had just been turned upside down. Marcus didn't sit. He simply stood there, tall and poised, the gravity of the moment placing a hush over the entire room. The board members watched him with a mixture of respect and remorse. The community leaders nodded subtly, as if acknowledging the courage it took to speak truths some people had been denying for far too long. Chief Holloway cleared his throat, rubbing a hand across his brow, suddenly looking like a man carrying decades of institutional weight on his shoulders. "Mr. Carter," he said gently, "thank you for your honesty. I think we all needed to hear that." Even he wasn't immune to the emotional punch Marcus had just delivered. It wasn't anger that Marcus had shown. No shouting, no insults, no bitterness. It was truth. Heavy, unvarnished truth. And truth can break through the most fortified defenses. Officer Bradley finally shifted, his voice cracking under the strain of a realization he wished he could undo. I didn't know," he muttered, staring at the table. "I didn't know who you were." Marcus turned toward him slowly, not harshly, not triumphantly, just meaningfully. "That's the point, Bradley," Marcus replied. "You shouldn't treat people with respect because of who they might be. You treat them with respect because of who you are." The words hit like a gavel strike. Bradley lowered his head again. For once, he had nothing to say. A few minutes later, the board excused themselves to deliberate, leaving Marcus and Bradley alone in the echoing room. Bradley avoided eye contact, shifting uncomfortably in his seat. Marcus walked toward the window, watching the city he had grown up in, the city he loved, the city he had fought his way through, flawed yet home. After a moment, Bradley finally spoke. "I've been a cop for 15 years, he said quietly. "Never thought of myself as racist. Never thought of myself as the problem. Marcus didn't turn around. Nobody ever does. Bradley swallowed. His voice quivered, barely detectable but real. "I'm sorry," he said. "That's all I can say. I'm sorry." Marcus turned then, watching the man's trembling hands. The arrogance was gone. The stone-faced bravado melted away. All that remained was a human being confronting the weight of his own failure. "Apology accepted," Marcus said softly. Then he added, "But an apology is a beginning, not the end." Bradley nodded, eyes still lowered. Just then the door opened, and Chief Holloway stepped back inside, followed by the review board. "Gentlemen," the chief began, "we've reached our decision." Bradley tensed. "Officer Bradley," Holloway continued, "based on your conduct, your repeated violations, and the incident Mr. Carter brought to light, the board has voted unanimously to place you on a 6-month unpaid suspension. You will also be required to complete cultural competency training, community mediation workshops, and 200 hours of community service with local minority youth programs." Bradley closed his eyes, relief and shame crossing his face all at once. It could have been worse. It should have been worse. But it was not a mere slap on the wrist. "This isn't punishment," Holloway added firmly. "It's accountability. And it's a chance for you to become the officer you should have been all along." Bradley nodded, voice barely above a whisper. "I understand." The board members shifted their attention to Marcus. "Mr. Carter," one of them said respectfully, "on behalf of the city, thank you. Not just for reporting this incident, but for everything you do to improve this community." Marcus nodded politely, though the praise wasn't something he basked in. He didn't fight for a spotlight. He fought for dignity. "And," the board member added, "we'd like to formally accept your proposal. The department will partner with Carter Logistics to begin the Community Policing Reform Initiative." A soft murmur spread through the room. Bradley looked up sharply, stunned again. More reforms. More opportunity for accountability. More progress. Not through anger. Not through retaliation. But through leadership. Marcus offered a small smile, gracious, humble, steady. "I'm ready to start whenever you are," he replied. Chief Holloway extended a hand. This time, when Marcus shook it, there was sincerity behind the gesture. As Marcus prepared to leave, Bradley stood up abruptly. "Mr. Carter." Marcus paused by the doorway. "I want to be part of that program," Bradley said, voice shaking but determined. "Whatever it takes. I want to do better." Marcus studied him for a long moment. The man who had insulted him for working too slowly. The man who had sneered at him for being lazy. The man who assumed he was broke. Invisible. Unimportant. But now he stood in front of him as a man seeking change. "Then show up," Marcus said. "Every day. Even when it's uncomfortable." "I will," Bradley promised. Marcus nodded once and walked out. A week later, the city held a press conference announcing the new Community Policing Reform Initiative. The mayor, police chief, community leaders, and media filled the plaza. But the real shock came when they announced the program's lead advisor. Officer Bradley, the same man who once tried to humiliate Marcus. The same man who had judged him without hesitation. Now standing at the podium, speaking openly about his mistakes, his blind spots, and the work ahead. Reporters murmured in surprise. Some citizens narrowed their eyes. Others watched with curiosity. Bradley lifted his eyes to the crowd, took a breath, and said, "I thought power came from a badge. But a man I once disrespected showed me that real power comes from integrity, from humility, and from treating every person like they matter." And in the front row, Marcus stood quietly, arms folded, not smiling, not gloating, just present, steady, proud. It was justice, not revenge, not punishment for the sake of punishment, but justice transformed. A kind of justice the world desperately needs. If this story touched you, if it stirred something in you, if it reminded you that change doesn't happen in silence but through courage, then do me a favor. Tap that like button to help this message reach more people who need to hear it. Drop a comment below, tell us what moment hit you the hardest, or share your own story. Your voice matters here. And if you believe in stories that shine light on truth, justice, and humanity, subscribe and join this growing community. Your support doesn't just help the channel, it helps keep these real, powerful stories alive. Thank you for watching all the way to the end. I'll see you in the next one.